Today, we'll start with an education-themed video illustrating who Shaw Contract is.
Who is Shaw Contract? We're people. First and foremost, friends, colleagues, neighbors, activists. A global brand that's local to many communities. Design is at our core. We design, make, and provide flooring. It sounds simple, but think about it. Our floors give foundation to space and support people within it. There's scale to consider for every decision we make. Each market segment we serve has its own unique needs, so we do a deep dive for better understanding. The more we know, the better our products can be. We ask ourselves, who are we designing for? What will our impact be? Our goal for everything we do is to make a smarter impact. Smarter impact is about going beyond ourselves, our work, and our communities. It's about enabling better choices that make a difference in people's lives. And recognizing that everything is connected. To make a smarter impact, we must be knowledge-led, human-centric, and optimistic. We believe in sharing knowledge and insight. In-depth market understanding sets us apart. We research the impact of color on health outcomes. We engage with students about how they envision new school design. We measure acoustic impact in the office and design solutions to support people working together. We make a smarter impact by connecting with our clients, sharing insights, and tapping into our common values. We design for people, whether they're our clients, end users, or employees. People always come first. We spend much of our time indoors. It's up to us to ensure that our flooring is manufactured responsibly for a healthy human experience. Almost 90% of our products are cradle-to-cradle certified, and all Shaw Contract manufacturing plants around the world are carbon neutral. A human-centric approach creates a smarter impact, from person to product to planet. We believe in the power of design to make positive change at scale. That belief, by its very nature, is optimistic. What we do matters. Each little decision adds up. Together, we can make a smarter impact. Ready to make a smarter impact? Talk with our team or visit our website to learn how.
So Shaw Contract is also a proud supporter of the Heart of A4LE, the school's next student design competition. This program has connected my team directly with the student voice so we can keep them at the center of our flooring solutions to ultimately better support their needs in future school designs, which, as Jamie said earlier, is very much evolving right before our eyes. For the previous academic year, there were 4 winning teams. Each of the team's presentation materials were delivered to your inbox this morning, so make sure that you check out what they have to say and what they have to show you about what they need and want from their learning environments that you are all designing for them. I hope that you find the school's next student presentations as inspirational, as insightful as my team does, and also that you're inspired by their appreciation for their current schools and learning communities that you have already created for them. So now I have the privilege of handing it over and introducing the super session panel discussion, Learning Happens Everywhere, Let's Prove It. Stephen.
Thank you, Michelle. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our session about some simple but amazing places where learning can happen. After last year's A4LE conference in Anaheim, Julie Williams asked me to think about putting together a hands-on plenary session for the 2020 Learning Landscapes Conference in San Antonio. We talked about some forays down into the San Antonio River, showing how learning can happen anywhere and everywhere. So given the new reality, it looks like now we're going to be taking our journey a little bit different way in the new virtual pandemic Zoom style. Over the next 90 minutes, we're going to be looking into some provocative ideas about everyday learning environments. Along the way, we're going to be mining some of your creative responses through some online cell phone polling. On Friday, we're going to circle back with you in a follow-up session where we're going to summarize our findings and get some conclusions about how we can all work creatively together to make learning more contextual and more real for everybody. So rather than a solo performance, I've asked some of my most creative colleagues to come together, kind of like a little jazz band, where everybody adds their expertise to create a sound that's greater than the sum of its parts. So in our band, Ann Taylor is going to be our trumpeter. This shouldn't be a surprise to people who know Ann because she's been trumpeting these ideas for many decades. She's an educator. She's founder of the School Zone Institute and the Architecture and Children program at the University of New Mexico. She's always pushed for more flexible and creative approaches to the design of learning environments, including her so-called everything on wheels, which for so many years Ann has been talking about. And son of a gun, if now you don't look around at the displays in the vendors' spaces, and almost all the furniture is now on wheels. So for many years, Ann has been advocating for more hands-on learning even before STEM became the new buzzword. Today, Ann's going to tell us a lot about some important lessons from her new fabulous book called Linking Architecture and Education, Sustainable Design of Learning Environments. And I will tell you that if you can only have one book in your education facility's library, this would be the one that I would highly recommend. Ann's longtime colleague, Linda Keene, is going to be play our surrogate tenor sax. Linda's an architect. She's a professor, an environmental designer, and the founder of an organization called Next. She's going to lay out some ways that we can learn through the natural environment. And then after that, the lovely Victoria Bergseigel is going to play our metaphorical trombone, except this time she's going to be substituting a metaphorical French horn, since that's the instrument she learned when she was a little girl. Victoria is an education design specialist and the founder of Architects of Achievement. Many of you, I'm sure many of you know Victoria's work. She's going to walk us through a discussion about powerful learning experiences and also to illustrate some of the things that we can learn by engaging with water. In many jazz bands, there's also a banjo player, but our friend Amy Yurko, which many of you also know, is going to be presenting like she's playing a funky ukulele, which is one of her favorite instruments. As an architect and educator, Amy is the founder of Brain Spaces, which is an education facilities programming and planning firm. She's also going to lead us in a brief overview of the learning pandemic style. And in addition to that, she's going to serve as our master of ceremonies for our online polling process, which we hope all of you will participate in. My name is Stephen Bingler, and I'll be tickling the keyboards as the founder and CEO of Concordia Community Center Planning and Design. I'm going to be talking about some things that we can learn from a short walk through the neighborhood where our office is located in downtown New Orleans. So with all of that, I also want to thank Baha Ray Javadi and Ali Rex from Concordia, because they've been responsible for herding all these cats, and I say cats, but tigers, and leading our band's rhythm section. So now I'm going to pass it off to Amy, and she's going to tell you about how each one of you can participate in the music making through your cell phones. Take it, Amy.
Muted. Unmuted is key. So what we're going to do is some polling, simple poll everywhere software. You guys could download it for free if you need to use it with your clients. But essentially, you don't need to download anything. All you have to do is send a text message to the address, sort of like it's shown on your phone, like it's shown on the screen, to 22333. And then in the subject line, the message that you send is Amy Y001. So once you set this up and hit send, it should send you a confirmation text. It says, hey, you're now involved in this live poll event. And you don't need to click any of the links that are on that live poll. You just continue to answer the questions by sending, continuing to send texts to that same address of 22333. So we're gonna set up a quick exercise just to make sure everybody's all on and connected. So I'll give you a second to connect that. And this is a very simple one. We just text A or B to 22333. Yes. And let's see. Ooh, we have some positives here. Wait. Okay. Yeah. So we're also kind of working on adjusting the slides. You know, I don't have control. Baha has control. Thank you, Baha. But the next question is here. What city are you currently in? So type that in. And if you happen to have a city that has 2 words, put a dash in between, or else it'll separate out your words. So yeah. Awesome. Whoa. All right, so it looks like we've gotten, cool. It looks like we've gotten, everybody's connecting in. Wow, we've got people from everywhere. This is so cool. The other thing I want you to mention, that I want you to know is what Stephen mentioned before, is that we are gonna bring this information back to you on Friday, so we can collate it and show you in detail what we're looking at here. I know this is kind of small, but awesome. So let's go on to the next one. So the next question is, what is your role? Are you a student? Are you an educator? Are you a facilities person, architect, all of the above? Again, text that in, and let's see who we have on the webinar today. Again, in this particular poll structure, this question structure, you have to put a dash if you have a 2-word role. So lots of architects, planners, ooh, researchers, that's cool. School facilities, excellent. Educator, teacher. Wow, we've got manufacturing, design, sales, excellent. So a lot of diversity in this roles in this group. A lot of architects though, so a lot of planners, not surprisingly. Cool. That's great. Let's keep it going and go to the next question. It's a little bit harder. This one is more of a phrase answer. And we're picking up some text from the previous questions. That's okay. We'll filter those. But what's your highest hope for the session? Why did you come to this session? What are you hoping to understand or learn or see? What do you hope to get from us? Excellent. Knowledge, learning, inspiration. Excellent. Oh, we got a lot. Oh gosh, we should start sweating. There's a lot of expectations here. What space will look like post-COVID? Exactly. Oh my gosh. Inspiration. Cool. Well, I think you're going to get a lot of that from the speakers here today. So stay tuned. But this is terrific. So stay tuned. The other thing I want to mention is that we're going to be asking you additional questions at the very end about what kind of things you want us to dive more deeply into on Friday. So keep that thought in mind. Meanwhile, we have another question. Now, this is not the polling screen. So this is just the intro, which is essentially recognizing the different kinds of learners in the world. Now, this is just a collection of 8 different kinds, but think about what kind of learner you are. Think about whether you're an analyst or a problem solver, a naturalist, adventurer, a mad scientist, or all of the above. And then we're going to ask you in the polling question, what kind of learner are you? And please feel free to respond in multiple times, because we know that it's difficult to pigeonhole the different ways that we learn. So let's see what we get. When we do this with just teachers, we get lots of multitaskers. I wonder why that is. All right. Wow. We have problem solvers. Excellent. We have lots of problems that need to be solved here. So excellent. But one of the things I love about this, exercise is what we see is that the kinds of learners vary greatly. Depending on your audience, they might be tweaked a little bit in this direction or that direction, as we see here that a lot of us are problem solvers. But we also know that there are, no matter what audience, there is a range of learners in the room. And that's a great illustration of how we can't design for one size fits all. We really have to look at addressing the needs of all the kinds of learners out there. And that's really important here. So we'll walk you through some of that as well. So thank you for that. So we're going to turn this over to Victoria to do another polling question, but let's hear from Victoria. This is an excellent exercise. Thanks, Victoria.
Oh, thank you, Amy. So I would like you right now to think of one of your life's most powerful learning experiences. Now, what just came to mind? Go with that. Where were you at? Who were you with? What senses were engaged? What were you feeling? What were you thinking? And now as you think about that powerful learning experience, if we were in person and had lots of time, then maybe we would tell a few stories. But for right now, I would just love for you to share what were the attributes of that learning experience that made it so very powerful. Good, on site. Love it. Wonder, one of my favorite words. Yep. Nice. Great. They keep coming. I know that we have hundreds of people on this call, and again, wish I could hear some of the reasoning behind these answers, but I hope that as we continue to go through our session today, that you will see some of these attributes shining through. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to my colleagues, and let's take it away.
Okay. So we want to always ask ourselves, why does this matter? And I urge you to do that with whatever you do, because we're really trying to get to the root of things here. But one of the things we want to start by talking about is teaching learning in the pandemic. What have we seen? What has happened? I mean, it's been some pretty stormy times. And so but it's really important to also find the silver linings and to look for things that we've learned through this teaching and learning pandemic style. And what do we do with that information to pull it into where we want to go? So some of the reactive thinking that we've seen in teaching and learning pandemic style are some of these words. Safe, which in this context, the reactive context means sterile and detached and distant. And remote means, well, not in a school building. And online means pretty much you're just still in a simulated classroom, teachers on the screen and audiences, students, wherever they are. Guided means, here, follow these instructions. Self-directed means, here, do this homework. And so we have the opportunity to kind of rethink this, of taking those same 5 words and saying, what if we said safe was open air outside? What if we said remote was anywhere? Could be in school too, but could be anywhere. What if we said online was just unlimited? What if we said guided was inquiry-based? What if we said self-directed was interest-based? I think it would look a lot different. So let's use the analogy of a phone. One of my favorites. You guys who know me have probably seen something similar to this before, but where we are now, or where we were pre-pandemic, was, we have the iPhone. It can do a lot of things. I mean, we have to do a lot of things. Technology tools, individualization, choice, flexibility, community, collaboration. We're doing a lot of these things. And so we are at a point where we could choose. We can choose to go back here to the Princess phone, which was capacity and code compliance and being healthy. And all those things really matter, but they're not they're not the only thing that matters. We could also choose to go further, to go forward and inspire futures, to consider about how brains work, to be future aware and connected and adaptable and experiential. We could really go further. And I think we ought to choose that direction. So what we know about schooling is that it's very structured and it's very curated. And what we know about learning, as from Victoria's exercise, is that it can go anywhere. It can be anywhere, but people follow their own paths naturally. So let's follow them and see what's going on there. It's not a new idea, learning outside. And this is a picture of a classroom on a ferry in New York City. Now, this was not the pandemic, but this was more tuberculosis related, and a really cool picture. We'll talk a little bit about, Stephen will talk a little bit about this later too. And this is from May in Italy, and a beautiful outdoor classroom, but it's, oh my gosh, it's still sage on the stage and people just sitting farther apart. And that poor tree in the foreground, I don't know what happened there. But anyway, horrible. Let's not go here. Or here, here's a Waldorf school of all things. It's all about outdoor learning. And what they did was they recreated an indoor classroom outside, even to the windows. Oh my gosh, don't do this. What we're also seeing is classrooms are simulated in the online learning environment. There's still a teacher at the front. There's still students just chiming in. So it's not necessarily the right direction either. So what is the right direction? I don't know. I think it might be something along these lines, but let's hear from some of our experts. Turn it over to Ann Taylor. Ann, are you there?
Sorry.
There she is.
Hi,
Hey, Ann.
my name is Ann Taylor and I am here.
Hey.
I'm from New Mexico. We're a little slow out here. Welcome to our new model of education and philosophies that support it. Learning from the built, the natural, and the cultural environment so that we can claim to understand the order in the universe. Very timely, don't you think? Now, in the past, we have treasured philosophies of idealism, like you read the great books and you're educated. Or there's experimentalism, John Dewey brought that to us, and more. Educators and even architects need a philosophy as a support system and framework for what we produce. The philosophical basis for our model today is ecosophy, or ecoism, based on the work of Arne Næss from Norway. This is a philosophy of ecological and human harmony. Now, with this philosophy of ecoism, I have compared the educator and the architect and the new roles of principles involved in each category. I'm comparing the students and their role, the teachers and the clients. The students are like clients, the teachers to architects, the curriculum to the architectural program that drives the design. One can see that architects are educators too. In designing schools, we need to examine a new and enriched way to educate and keep the whole body healthy, stimulate the mind, of course, and definitely need a creative spirit for each student. We also need to look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how they relate to the learning environment and what I call habitability needs on the right-hand side. Maslow's theory nicely supports what we are trying to do with enriched indoor and outdoor environments for learning. And then, besides Amy, our friend here, we also look to John Eberhardt, who is doing research on neuroscience and the effects of architectural thinking on the brain. Now, this is a chart that exemplifies the way most curriculum is now organized and shows an alternative for integrated learning. Up above, you see there are 45-minute periods of study of subjects. And I use balance across the bottom, which is a discipline. It goes across the disciplines, and it's a model for learning, which moves horizontally across disciplines, the way the world is and the way that the brain works and functions. Balances cross the model horizontally and is seen in math, and science, social studies, art, health, etc. Now, here are two concepts about the environment. The Eurocentric pioneers came to America and saw the land as a way to develop resources and make money. It put them outside of the environment, apart from it, pushing. My Native American students, who have a very sacred view of the land and its resources, taught me that we are people living on the land and we are a part of the environment, not apart from it. Now, we also want to look at Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. And we all learn in different ways, and you probably know this. Some of us are visual, a lot of you are. Verbal, linguistic, logical, mathematical, kinesthetic, musical for sure, and others. Learning environments must take into account these diverse multiple intelligences and support new environments for learning. And now our babies are being wired and born to be wired. So we have girls learning about electricity in their classroom. It's all technology. Now, architects, please hear this. We need studios as classrooms. The way you were trained for hands-on and group learning, giving more power to students to do their own learning. Students are asking to make their education real. In Japan, students wanted to save a stream that was to be put in a culvert. Students loved studying at this stream and were dismayed that it might disappear into an inaccessible culvert. So they worked with architects, they wrote reports, they made charts, they went to the city, met with the city council and got the decision reversed. In Stockton, California, students said to Stephen Bingler and me, "Don't give us another high school, we already have one." Well, what do you want? And they said, "We want a farm and a study center on the San Joaquin Delta." These kids were way ahead of us. Now, how can we make a school a true learning environment? Architecture that teaches. There are 35 pages in my book, Linking Architecture and Education, filled with ideas for architectural elements for the architect on the left. How can you use various systems as learning tools? And in the middle, there is a way for the teacher to interpret these and use them as learning tools. And on the right is a taxonomy of learning for students. We want you to use design of acoustics, plumbing, natural lighting, and more for embedding what we call manifestations or cues for learning. For instance, what can we learn from windows and natural lighting? Well, we can learn about the movement of the sun and the seasons. We can track the movement of shadows and draw them on the floor. What do we know the cardinal directions? We can keep weather statistics, cloud formations and what they are and what they portend, measure light density and the physics of light, conservation of energy with light shelves and triple paned windows, use windows as light tables for tracing, and even for eye exercises, looking up and out and beyond. Remember the days of windowless classrooms? So here's a very old school with an imaginative teacher using a classroom door as a learning tool, even if it's old. So she put a magic marker on the bottom of the door, made a little construction theater out there, and had the kids, each child, use the door to see that there were 90 degrees if they went halfway and 80 degrees, 180 degrees, which was, of course, half a circle. They measured the length, the width, the height, and the area of the door. They realized that the door is positive form and that the opening is negative space, sort of like addition and subtraction. And then there's the hinge in two parts. When you put it together, of course, it makes a simple example of one of the 6 basic machines in physics. Now, a doorknob is a manifestation of a machine also, but many children who are young have to take a hold of that door with their prehensile graphs, turn it, push it, or pull it, and they're learning kinesthetically from that doorknob. Now, Antoine Predock designed our architecture building here at the University of New Mexico. Everything is exposed, showing the logic of design and construction to those who will be working in the field. So we feel that a teacher is really a designer of the mind, and the architect is a designer of creativity and aesthetics, where learning and teaching take place. We need to change the configuration of our schools with the double-loaded quarters off long hallways with replicative classrooms. You know, a fifth grader said to me, each classroom should be focused on a particular area, such as dance or music, a gallery, a greenhouse, maybe even a career center. And we need to move around to go to different classes instead of sitting still for 18 years. Now, we've been in many, many classrooms through the years, and many are a cacophony of visual pollution. With this kind of messy classroom, we are denying the developmental rights of children who are trying to discern figure from ground or embedded figure so they can learn how to read. We need architects and interior designers to give teachers professional development on space planning and storage. Miles of classroom need to be transformed into studios. Here's a concept drawing draft of an old 900 square foot classroom made into a design studio. There is a drawing wall, drop-down tables embedded in the wall like ironing boards, everything on wheels, a gallery at the top for presentations with stackable stools, outdoor studio for landscape design and gardening, learning survival skills. Here's another transformation using the same space as two traditional classrooms, contrasting a regular classroom with a newer model that incorporates the outdoors as a learning place and movement and student power. Very important, student power to do their own learning. Can you find the teacher station there? The minute the pandemic happened, Linda Keene and I sent out a press release to parents, helping them to set up a design center in the home. This is becoming very important, a workplace for children in the home, and even for parents who are working at home. In one school, we taught architecture and design to immigrants and refugees. They were excited to be able to communicate while learning to speak English. They didn't have to speak, but they were very visual. They were so happy to solve the paper bridge problem and load it with stones. It is the joy of accomplishment on their faces that we need to spread around the world. Now we're going to go outside and look at nature as a learning tool, not just drawing plants and trees, but asking, what do some of the patterns mean and how can these patterns be used for designing many things? In this case, there's some math going on here with measuring the tree and of course, looking at the linear principles of design in the tree bark. Now look at this cottonwood leaf. Things can become thoughts or ideas and a conceptual idea for something else. Conceptual inspiration came from a simple cottonwood leaf. Look at this. Looking at the veins, the main veins and the sub veins in this cottonwood leaf, Kyle, the student I was working with, thought it would be a good idea and an inspiration for a whole transportation system. He translated the side veins into suburbia, going from their homes to the main vein, which they boarded to get to the city. His conceptual thinking expanded as we spent time together using biomimicry as a motivation for his design. Now, I think you have seen in what I have had to say, we are borrowing a visual way of thinking from architects because we feel you can design indoor and outdoor spaces better for learning. You can help teachers teach design for more enlightened citizens, and your environments can hold manifestations that symbolize ideas that we have formerly learned from textbooks. I hope you now have a new philosophy and a framework for your design process with simple examples that will transform children's learning and their learning environment. We believe that the eye is the organ of wisdom. Thank you for your wisdom.
And we go back to why does this matter? So another poll question. And I saw in the chat, there's a few people having some trouble with that. So again, if you want to connect, the instructions are at the top of the slide. In the text to box, put the 22333, and in the body of the text, Amy Y, and then just begin texting the letters of the survey. So let's hear, which of these settings do you have easy access to? Not all of us have a backyard. In Chicago, I have no backyard. My house is lot line to lot line. So my backyard is 2 hours away in Michigan, which is where I'm sitting right now. And it's a beautiful day. Where do you have access? And these are the learning settings these are the settings that can become learning settings. And what we're going to do next is hear about how we can take some of these settings and optimize them for learning, just as Anne has illustrated with the great examples she just showed. Linda?
Great. Hi, I'm Linda, and I grew up playing in a river. And I'm here to share opportunities for learning outside and blurring fun and play. Because to be learning is to be alive, and learning is to be having fun. And outside, the world is waiting. So I hope you can watch this 60-second video at another time and see the evolution of the Earth, which took 4.5 billion years to bring everything that is outside your door, from rocks to fish to plants to trees to animals. And we only need to open the door and step out to begin our journey through Precambrian, Paleozoic, Mesozoic, Cenozoic, and poof, that half second when humans arrived. Because all of our education starts with nature. And it's there that we can look out, we can look around, and we can look up. Being an explorer of the world, we can look closely, we can document what we're seeing, we can make patterns, we can observe connections, and we become a green imagination. We've opened that door. Before you go, consider taking a few essentials, things that scientists, artists, designers, environmentalists use. You might want to take a journal so that you can document your finding. You may wish to take a magnifying glass to look at things more closely, or binoculars to look things afar, or some containers in case you find something amazing to bring home and share. If it's raining, you can just Google next.cc on your phone or your iPad and see a flurry of activities and journeys that introduce tools, language, discovery, and design. So let's get started. Looking down, let's squish in the mud, splash in a puddle, sift the sand, or sit on a rock. And thanks to Dr. Gary Greer, we can look closely at those grains of sand and find that the white and beige beaches are actually incredibly unique, different pieces and shapes and forms created over the ages, just like we are unique and different, and we will create ourselves as we grow. Pick up some of those rocks, look for igneous, sedimentary, metamorphic, splash some water on them and have them surprise you and dazzle you with their colors. And if you scratch that topsoil, you'll see that there are silver wings and centipedes and ants and worms and spiders and ladybugs, oh my. And then you can find places that these bugs live. They eat the inside of the bark and then create pathways, just like humans create roads to go from city to city. So we can make connections between what we as humans do and what nature does. In my biome, we have cheeky chipmunks, squirrels, ducks, deers, and more. Who lives outside your door? And when you go out there, of course, there's grass. Take off your shoes, tickle your toes, but then ask your parents and school board members not to use insecticides, herbicides, or pesticides, because they kill those lower level, those other life forms that we just saw, and they're all part of our food chain. And we are all here on Earth together. Find out what lived before that grass in your biome. I have short and long-term prairie and oak savannas. If you look, there's the grass on the left, really short and really short roots that absorbs and filters about the same water as concrete and asphalt. With the beauty of the prairie plants above, it's the beauty of the roofs below that aerate our soil, allow worms and insects to decompose and do their job. This is the type of construction humans need to be doing, something that gives full life cycle. Please start planting these indigenous plants and say, good morning, prairie drop seed. I'm on my way to school. Explore the flora and fauna at school, at home, and find out from Roy Divlik and the No Maintenance that plants like to live together. And again, you can go online to Next and you can find a plant ID, get garden answers. I do this all the time because that web of nature now exists digitally as well as in person. Everywhere we go, we can carry the sustainability of learning moments. Find nature and human-made materials and compare their beauty and understand their life cycle, their uses, and their maintenance. You can become a material scientist. With nanotechnology, it's the next industrial revolution. And then become a collector. Find all these beautiful things outside, bring them inside, share them with people, share the joy of what we find and can discover, of both people-made and nature-made. Go out there and where there's grass, restore that vegetation and wildlife will come. Look at nature closely, draw its patterns, and who would know that a hollyhock could be an example of a human tower? And then a flower, a brooch, or a leaf, a water filtering fountain. It abounds. Nature also has invisible patterns, symmetrical, translational, rotational, radial. Find them and see how humans are making use of them. Nature's patterns. Know them, name them, explore them, create with them. And like Richard Serra, make a list of verbs. What does nature do and what does design do? It wraps, it evolves, it grows, it layers, it tiles, it scales, it expands. So it's not just an aesthetic or an object, but it actually is a performance. So this time around, sketch that pattern, name it, and build something three-dimensionally. And you will find that this abounds in the practice of architecture and engineering today, looking at new materials of how to shelter human beings in a very biomimetic way. Take your stuff you collected and make textured spaces and textured forms and see buildings made by water vapor or an Olympic stadium like a bird's nest or a rock cave that produces symphonies. It's amazing the integration that humans with their imagination can begin to stitch. Or go out into the wilderness with Andy Goldsworthy, an artist who finds even more beautiful things in nature and creates sculpture and moments of wonder that we can appreciate and give back some beauty. Also celebrate the beautiful work of Shigeru Oban that does pattern buildings that let in light, all made from a natural material, paper. So let's see and think about everything we've just learned looking down in that short period of time, from plate tectonics to geology, plants, roots, animals, insects, looking out. My favorite is the horizon between the sea or the land and the sky, because all of these are constantly changing and scientists are studying the interaction between all of them. It's called systems thinking. So looking out, you really see the integration of the built environment and the natural environment. You can watch the sun through NASA as the driver of all those changing systems, and then how it actually moves the ocean currents, it moves the weather, it gives us energy to live. Then you can run back into the city and see how humans are fabricating the ground and then rising into the sky to celebrate places to live, learn, work, play. And how can these two be more sympathetic? So looking out, you can see the integration between all the things that nature brings and humans bring. And then begin your walk in your own community. And Stephen will talk about this later, but identify the buildings, understand the spaces between them, learn how to read a facade like a face. The eyes are the window to our soul, and the windows of a building are the eyes to what's going on inside of them. You begin to connect to your community, you begin to connect to culture through nature. And being outside, drawing or sketching, and is so much fun. And when you come in, just like the inventor of Velcro, you might go, what's this sticking on my shirt? And it's a seed coming through the air, become a seed collector, find out what those seeds will grow, and then start growing them inside, in your front yard, in your backyard, on a rooftop terrace. Ask your school to create an urban agricultural garden, grow food, harvest the food, cook with the food, celebrate local produce. It's all part of nature. Now, real quickly, many of us know that the rainforests are being depleted, but many of us cannot even name the trees in our own yard or in our own community. Look at them, identify that tree, and find out that actually humans have tree DNA inside of themselves. So they are part of us and we are part of them. Use Leaf Snap on the Tree ID, next Tree ID journey, and find out that identity of your tree, and then run home and get the identity of your family tree. Where did you come from? Where were your grandparents and parents from? And where are humans going as we migrate across the world? And what does that mean for nature? And then go out and look at how insects and animals live and ask, how do we as humans live here in the Midwest biome or on the other side of the world? Or how did we live in the past, or how will we live in the future? And then fill out Maslow's triangle for what you need to live to be healthy, but then also what a bird or a bee or a tree needs. So there you see it. Looking out, we see that design is our nature, that we are nature, and that we can imagine a better nature, a future for ourselves. So last one, looking up. And of course, we all love to predict the weather as well as the people on TV. So predict the weather, learn about the insects and the birds, become a circadian schedule with the dawn and the dusk in the city, in nature. Or look at the whole world as it's sunlit right now, with half of us in sun, half of us sleeping, but with the 24/7 cities. It's all accessible. But with the digital age, we still need to relish and inherit the beauty of the seasons, winter, spring, summer, fall. Our time outdoors has rapidly changed. It used to be 150 years ago, we'd walk to school. Now more than half of students in the US are bused to school, and they're in school all these hours, maybe for a 20-minute recess, and then they're gone. So we need to mix play with play in nature. Please check out next.cc for 10 years of children and imaginations of all ages, integrating eco-literacy and digital fluency while learning through play and project-based, place-based fun activities. So I'm not sure what they've kept in the presentation. So draw that built space and then bring in nature. Bring it with every gusto that you have from growing up in nature. Fill out your nature bingo card, fill out your built environment card, bring them together. Spend time learning with nature, in nature. Let it guide you as you play, as you find delight. As you grow up in nature. Start your journey today. Thank you.
All right, here we are back again. Thank you, Linda. And so we see learning can be playful. I'm sure you all see that remember in your own lives and see that with your own kids. But where have you learned through play? Let's hear from you guys in the webinar. In a creek, in the playground, of course. Remember those old merry-go-rounds that people would fly off of and break their arms? Those were awesome ways to learn centripetal force. Especially when you broke your arm, then you never forgot that. Not that I'm talking about personal experience. Perfect. Family cabin. I mean, all the things at the beach, in the treehouse. Wow. In the forest, of course, sailing, making stuff. Awesome. Keep them coming. Diving. Cool. Riding a bike at the beach. Excellent. Well, in keeping with Stephen's original intent to make this an interactive session, this section is actually going to be live, which is very dangerous. And those of you who know me know I'm not such a great person in the kitchen, but I've had a little bit of fun with this. So I appreciate, Stephen, you giving me this challenge. Is looking for things that you can do in your own kitchen that can be really interesting and fun exercises for learning. Experiments, mostly science are the ones that I chose because they're short, but I've been sort of reliving third grade science, so you'll have to just bear with me because I've been having some fun with this. So what I'm going to do, I'm on an iPad here because so I can move this around, is what I'm going to do is, thanks, I've got to unplug it. I didn't want it to run out of power. All right, so we are going to, okay, can you see my kitchen? Oh, there's a little bit of glare here. You can see my kitchen. Somehow, okay, there we go. Sorry. So I'm going to turn my camera around so you can see my little setup here. I'm looking at some basic household things like dish detergent, ammonia, vinegar, some food coloring. I also made this concoction last night. Oh, you guys can see this is my my bar. It's made out of Legos, you know, just because. But I took this cabbage and boiled it down to make some liquid. We're going to use that liquid too. So let's go back to our setting here. I'm going to run around into the kitchen. And again, you guys know me. If you guys know me about kitchen, I'm going to mess something up. So I'll just say it. All right, so I'm going to start with the cabbage. Now this is cabbage. This is the juice that I just boiled down from cabbage. It's a little bit stinky. So if you're going to do this exercise, just know that. And you can see it's, I hope you can see that it's very blue. I didn't know what time of day we were going to be doing this. So I brought a flashlight. Can you kind of see how blue it is? And so what it, okay, it looks like we lost everybody, but I'm going to keep going. Are we back? Give me a nod. Stephen, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Keep going.
Okay. Okay, from Bill. Thank you. I'm back. All right. So I think we just had a loss of Wi-Fi, which is a something that happens when when you're out in the country here. So that happened, but you guys can see that I just poured, I poured ammonia into the juice. If you can see that it turned green. Now I'm gonna try putting some vinegar in there and you'll see it again change colors. This time it changed to pink. So I'm going to move on to the next exercise. If we can all see this. Now this is an exercise looking at, instead of looking at acids and bases, this one is looking at soap. And everybody's wondering what happens when you wash your hands and get those coronaviruses off your hands.
Amy,
This is a good illustration of that.
Amy, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm getting text messages that says, oh, I'm sorry, they say it's fixed now. They were only,
Okay.
which is not what they came for.
Okay. Well, you know, we're winging it here, just like most teachers do, you know, when we have to do teaching lessons, right? So what you're looking at here is a plate of milk, and it's just regular old milk. As a matter of fact, it was expired, so, you know, I don't mind wasting it. And I put some food coloring in here, so it'll illustrate what happens when I just take regular dish soap, which is just dish soap, and I'm gonna put that on a, let's see, can I put that on a Q-tip, right? And watch what happens when I put that into the milk. So what happens is soap repels water, but it attaches itself to fat. And since milk has both water and fat in it, it is grabbing the color of the that has attached to the milk, and it's repelling the water. So what happens when you wash your hands with soap is the soap grabs the fat, which has the dirt in it, and then it allows water to wash that down the drain. So that's super cool. This is going to work for a while here, and I hope you guys try this at home because it's really kind of cool. And I know we lost a little bit of time, so I'm going to do this really quick. Now this is just a plate, it's just a dish, and this is a dry erase marker. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a stick figure. This is a non-gender stick figure. Could be a girl, could be a boy. And then I have a dropper that just has plain old tap water in it. It's just water. So I'm gonna try to see what happens if I add water to my stick figure here. And so you guys can see what happens. What happens is, can you see that? Is that the, and I may have frozen, but the stick figure can dance. It sort of lifts off the plate. Now, why that happens is because, unlike a Sharpie, which the ink has bonding elements to bond to almost everything, dry erase has a chemical reaction that doesn't bond to anything, or tries not to bond to things. And so that's how we can make this dance. When we were doing this with my kid and my friend's kid the other day, we drew a whole party and we had them all dancing together. So that was our socialization here. So I'm going to come back to this, and thank you for your patience with our technology. I know we took a little bit longer than we wanted to, but anyway, the point is you can have a lot of fun doing really amazing things in your own kitchen, and use that as your own personal science lab. So I'm going to turn it over to Victoria, who's going to talk about some really cool things that you can learn from a body of water.
Thank you, Amy, and great little experiments there. Of course, how do we inspire wonder, curiosity, joy on a body of water, be it urban, suburban, rural, saltwater, freshwater, lake, pond, stream? You get the picture. And I was really excited to see many of you mentioning that some powerful learning and play happened on bodies of water. I was really lucky as a child. I grew up in a no stoplight town, but my elementary school was 3 blocks away from this beach. We absolutely loved going down to the beach, especially at low tide, collecting little specimens, turning over rocks, and watching the crabs skitter. And we engaged all of our senses. I really loved the fact that the smells, what we could touch, the beach etiquette that we learned. Another body of water that I had a lot of fun with as a child was a pond. And my Norwegian immigrant grandparents lost everything in the Dust Bowl. So they packed 7 kids, themselves and all their worldly belongings in a 1926 Buick and came out west to where there were a lot of other Norwegians. They saved their money to buy a farm, and this used to be a stream. But my uncle, the oldest, decided, hey, we could irrigate the fields if I dug an irrigation pond and put in the pump house. So great. Spent a lot of time with my cousins there in that pond, at that pond, in and around. There's a story about in the pond coming up, but you know, we would chop down little trees and we made huck fin rafts and we threw things into the pond to see what would happen. One day my cousins decided that they were going to go swimming in this pond. Now you get where I'm going with this. It's pretty brackish water. So my sisters and I stood on the shore and said, you have fun with that. Well, when those boys emerged, guess what they were covered with? Leeches. And I have to tell you that my little sister was just absolutely fascinated and gleeful to see all these leeches on their bodies. She ran about a mile up to the farmhouse and got a jar of water and put it in a jar to put it in the water, and then held it up to see all the little wildlife and things. And then she went through this period of a fascination with leeches, both their historical use, and I will tell you that my little sister physician today tells me that in 2005, the FDA actually approved the use of medical leeches for therapy. Don't think I'm signing up for that therapy anytime soon, but there you have it. This elegant diagram can be found in Anne's book. It gives you all kinds of curriculum ideas about what you can do in around water with students. Another thing I like to think about when I'm teaching is the Socratic method. So give people an experience, take them somewhere, ask them, what do you notice? What do you wonder about? Do you have a hypothesis? How will you prove it? Is there a problem? How will you solve it? So here in Seattle, in this fall, a small maritime regional high school, Maritime and Ocean Sciences High School, is going to open. Founded on 3 very critical guiding principles. One would be equitable access. The other would be quality hands-on education, and finally a curriculum that helps students really tackle environmental issues and advances social justice. So why now? Well, genius loci, the genius of the place-based learning. We have a lot of water all around us here in the Pacific Northwest. So why don't we take advantage of it? Workforce development. Maritime is the 3rd largest economic driver in our state. And in fact, we are approaching what many are calling the silver tsunami. Probably won't surprise you that the average maritime worker is 54 years old, white and male. Very few women in the industry and very few people of color. In terms of expanding opportunities for all, the average wage in Washington state is $54,000 a year, but in maritime in Seattle, it's $83,000 a year. So we really want to engage our students in opportunities should they choose to pursue them. You see a picture of Seattle here, but first I want to take a moment and ask Stephen to tell us a little bit about his idea for a school on a barge in New Orleans.
Well, this is a little bit of a side trip. A lot of you are familiar with schools and museums and schools and zoos and other things. And so lately we've been working on a project called New Harmony High, where we're thinking about putting the school on a barge and floating it around the Louisiana, up and down the Mississippi River and out into the bayous. So the students can actually get their hands in the situation that really they're going to inherit in South Louisiana, which is a very catastrophic change in our environment because of climate change and all the impacts of it that will be on their lives more than ours. And our idea was, what better way to do that than just get out there in the environment and touch it and feel it and live it.
Thank you, Stephen. Coming back to Seattle, back a slide just a little bit. Coming back to Seattle, you see it in the background there, up in the upper left-hand corner, there's Elliott Bay. You can see all of the port right in front of you. And there's, I don't know what you notice about this river. It's called the Duwamish. But I would just point out how industrial this looks and how straight that river is. So now for a little bit of a history lesson. Just over 100 years ago, the river looked like this. Had lots of curves in it, had 7,000 acres of estuary, had Duwamish fishing villages. But the problem is that we industrialized it, we polluted it, we dredged it, we straightened it, and so much so that we drove our Native American friends away. And ironically, even though Seattle gets its name from Chief Seattle, or Chief Sealth, as you would say in Lasiutsi, they're our Salish Sea language, they were driven away. So when it became time for the feds to recognize tribes, the Duwamish didn't even get recognized. And super fun site. But we're cleaning it up. And here are a couple of young women who are part of the Duwamish Youth Corps that actually work together to clean up the river. Here they're painting a mural. I'll tell you more about that mural in a minute. But I just want to point out that they have adult mentors that really care about them. They are cleaning up and beautifying their community. They range in ages from like 13 to 16 and actually mentor one another. So when we think about this high school, we thought, why don't we place it down there in South Park, near on the Duwamish, with access to water, and near and in a community that needs it the most. So strategically, we wanted to locate it in a place that, when you look at Seattle Public Schools has about 53% students of color in total. But if you come south, as in many cities, it becomes much more diverse. And finally, when we were doing some community engagement, one young woman said it the best: there should be no decisions about us without us. So I'm going to carry that one with me for a long time to come. So we want to cast a wide net, consider critical lifelines. What do we need to do to make it happen? We're not just going to snap our fingers. And here's that mural. The students worked with a Native American artist, and they put the bend back in the river, and our beautiful salmon are beginning to return. Boeing actually is directly across the river from this particular building, this warehouse. So there's the plane, and there's our majestic Mount Rainier. But most importantly, we give homage to our Native heritage. So, so I say we can use bodies of water wherever we go. We can fight against the structural inequalities that have prevented women and people of color from being deeply involved in all the opportunities available to them. And I want to finish with a quote from John Steinbeck. In the 50s, he was asked to write for the National Education Association about his favorite teacher. And here's what he said: "In her classroom orbit, our speculations raised the world. She did not tell, she catalyzed a burning desire to know. Under her influence, the horizons sprung wide, fear went away, and the unknown became knowable. But most important of all, the truth, that dangerous stuff, became beautiful and very precious. Every morning we came to her carrying new truths, new facts, new ideas, new questions, cupped in our hands like captured fireflies." Thanks.
Thank you, Victoria. And we're going to finish up with just a few minutes to go in a different direction, to be thinking, in addition to water, in addition to kitchens and all these other things, what can we learn from our neighborhood? Right around the corner, right around down the street. This is a quote from Jim Starlin, one of the great Marvel comic writers and artists, about the impact that his neighborhood had on his future. We're going to talk about a neighborhood that I'm very familiar with. It, in fact, is Central City, New Orleans. It's right downtown. You can look in the distance see the high-rise buildings of downtown New Orleans. And we're on a very historic street, used to be called Dryad Street. And on Dryad Streets is our office, where we used to go every day. Central City is sandwiched between French Quarter and uptown New Orleans. Of course, New Orleans has grown in a lot of different directions, so it's not as central as it used to be. But nevertheless, it's a really important neighborhood in the city. It's got a lot of history. As I mentioned, every day we go in and out of this building, and all we have to do is walk down the street, and we can see some amazing things. Just sometimes we take these things for granted, I think. So let's just take a walk in our neighborhood and just see what we can find. A little discovery. Well, right around the corner is a very important church. It's called the First Zion Baptist Church, and it's the place where the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was formed during the Civil Rights Movement. Martin Luther King and Reverend Ralph Abernathy met here and worked together to create this organization, which is now a national organization in the history of the Civil Rights Movement. Also on our street is the McCroy's store, that Five and Dime store, where there were boycotts, and those boycotts were against some of the local merchants who wouldn't allow Black people to work in their stores. They would allow them to actually buy from their stores, but they wouldn't allow them to work in their stores. But as strange as it may seem, these stores were actually some of the only places in the city where Black people could actually try on the clothes that they were buying. Because on Main Street, the Canal Street, only white people were allowed to try on the clothes. How can we imagine that in the day that we live in? So special tribute to Aretha Castle Haley, who was our local hero. Martin Luther King was our national and international hero, but Aretha Castle Haley was our local hero who staged some of those sit-ins and some of that those demonstrations on Dryad Street. And that was what it was called back in the day. And now we're happy to say that our street that our office is on is called Aretha Castle Haley Boulevard. So we've come a little ways anyway. Our neighborhood is also the site of a number of jazz funerals, and usually behind the casket in a jazz funeral is something called the Second Line Band. And the Second Line Band was actually part of the birth of jazz many years ago, when the band would follow the casket, and then when the casket reached the funeral the funeral site, the trumpet would wail, and in the wailing of the trumpet, the spirit of the person would be sent off into the universe. What a beautiful thing that music and this transition of life were connected so closely together. In fact, the umbrellas that you see in the second line were there because in those days, the traditions came from Yoruba traditions in Africa, where it was actually a good luck to be buried in the rain. So the umbrellas are symbolic of the rain, so everybody could be buried in a happy way, at least symbolically. In the back, you can also see some very beautifully, brightly colored feathers. Those feathers are signified, or actually a signature of a group that we call the Mardi Gras Indians. And the Mardi Gras Indians are Black people who dress up around special occasions throughout the year as Indians, but in these brightly colored costumes that they spend all year sewing, hand sewing a new one every year. And there's also a band called the Wild Magnolias Band that plays funky New Orleans music. And if you look at all of those things, think about that as a curriculum. Think about it as a social studies course. Think about it, what a fun way to learn social studies right in your own neighborhood. And in this case, we just uncovered a few ideas. Next, in addition to that, and this is actually a mural, we have visual arts in our neighborhood. This is a mural that is depicting Big Chief Bo Dallas, who is one of the big chiefs of the Wild Magnolias. In addition to that, we have other murals. This is one at the Ashe Cultural Arts Center that's really depicting a lot of different things about our culture in New Orleans, all on the wall in bright colors. And this is actually just a couple of blocks from our office. But in addition to visual arts, we also have language arts. We don't have sidewalks, we have banquettes that came from French. And we also don't have trolley cars, we have street cars. And we also have voodoo, which is a different kind of religion that's not everywhere. And in voodoo, we have a word called gris-gris, which is a spell that can be cast on people. And voodoo is still a religion that's practiced in New Orleans. In fact, a friend of mine is a voodoo priestess. Another word is jazz, but it used to be called J-A-S-S, but ragtime jazz, but now we all know it as jazz. We also have architecture. This is a shotgun house in New Orleans. And why don't you turn off your mute and tell us about what you remember about shotguns when you came to New Orleans.
Well, it's a shotgun house, so you have to have a shotgun because this house is long and narrow, almost like the land grants here in New Mexico with these families that would give land down to their sons and daughters. But anyway, if you had a gun, you could go into this house, which almost looks like a double wide in a way, a narrow double wide, and shoot a gun and it would go right out the back.
So it's a long, skinny house that was designed to fit on a long, skinny lot. And we have a lot of those in New Orleans. And that house that we just saw was actually also the home, a place where Buddy Bolden was born. And Buddy Bolden is essentially the grandfather of jazz. We don't have any music that we can hear that he ever played because he was around before music could be recorded. Or at least it was in the early stages, and nobody had anything in New Orleans to record his music with. So he's a memory at this point, but a legend actually in the city, and not everybody's heard about that jazz at that depth. We hear about some of the more recent people, like for example, in the C.J. Peet housing project, there was a more recent musician, Percy Master P. Miller. And so Master P is also from Central City. And so just in case you think that we're just old fashioned jazz, I just want to be sure you know we're hip as well. So that's another thing. Think of all the things that we can learn from the arts just in our neighborhood, down the street and around the block. These are just a few examples of just uncovering some of these ideas that we can experience. Next. This is what Fred Rogers has to say about what neighborhoods are good for. And what he says is really important. Actually, somebody sent a chat in about this just a minute ago. This is a view out of our office door last spring. In New Orleans, we are the victims of climate change. And it's not just climate change. I mean, we've been having these issues for a long time, but they're more extreme now than ever. So these kinds of events where we have to look out the window and see a street full of water are happening more and more every day, every week. And we just had 3 hurricanes within a month of each other. And so fortunately, we have a sewage and water board that's been around for literally 100 years or more than that to address this issue. And at the Sewage and Water Board, a lot of engineers and a lot of scientists who over the years have been trying to figure out this city of New Orleans is actually below sea level. So, and we have a big levee around, so we're in a big bathtub. So what are we going to do with the water when it goes? First of all, we all have to work together as a community to make sure that all of our culverts and our catch basins are clean, so that when we get a big storm, all the water has a good place to go. Well, where does it go to if it's below sea level? How are you going to get it up to the sea level? Well, many decades ago, people started figuring out pumping stations. So we have giant buildings in New Orleans where all those numbers are, that are giant machines, actually, that take up sometimes a half a block with these giant pumps that pump that water out of the city and up into Lake Pontchartrain. So what are some of the things we can learn from that? Well, Victoria, you were the one who told us about water. What do you think?
Yeah, like you and like the person who commented in the chat, I'm really concerned about climate change. It's the existential issue of our time. And I know young people really care about it, and I hope that they help us find some solutions. In terms of fluid dynamics, I mean, it's basic physics and engineering, and it's the study of fluids and gases. So you have, of course, many subdivisions within fluid dynamics. There's thermodynamics, aerodynamics, but most apropos of your hometown in New Orleans, there's also hydrodynamics. So when you think about the circulation of and the properties of fluid, you think about flow, velocity, pressure, density, temperature, and how do they operate in space and time. So again, I think this allows us, when we really engage students in some of these problems and solutions, it gives us an opportunity to really have students use their wits and imaginations.
Thank you, Victoria.
You bet.
There we have it. We've talked about learning about some social sciences, history. We talked about learning about the arts. Guess what? Now we can learn from science right around the street, right out the door from our office. And last but not least, we have some beautiful buildings in New Orleans. And this is actually a synagogue that's right around the corner from our office called the Beth Israel Synagogue. And that building is actually created using some very interesting, simple geometry, very simple geometric shapes. And of course, we start learning about geometric shapes when we're very young. So Anne, tell us about these kids learning about geometry.
Well, we're designing an architectural park. The story goes, for the children anyway, the mayor wants a new kind of park with architectural elements in it. And so these are 3 to 5-year-old kids that are really into domes and vaults and columns and Romanesque arches and Gothic arches, and all doing it with paper. And of course, the imagination runs to their heads, so they put one of the domes on their heads. We had a great time. It's a great way to teach about architectural elements.
I got a dome on my head, right?
Yeah, you do.
So another thing, and we're going to jump now from, it's one thing to talk about our neighborhoods, but think about architecture all over our neighborhoods and all over the world. Think about all the geometry that goes into, in the same way that those scientists put all of that hydrodynamics into our pumps. Think about all that geometry and numerology that architects have put into buildings. And wouldn't it be great if we could turn that around and suck all that geometry right back out and put it in the heads of all our kids, so that they would be able to learn geometry in space instead of on a book page. In 3 dimensions. So I want to just leave you with this final example of Chartres Cathedral. That's a beautiful rose window, and that rose window has 12 elements, and it's 12 elements for a reason, because it's integrating not only the geometry but also the history and the culture and the spirituality, because there were 12 apostles, and each one of those little circles in that window depicts the history of each one of those apostles. And a story about those apostles. And that was in a day when, actually it's kind of interesting, because they didn't have textbooks, because people couldn't read. So what they were reading, and the stories that they were getting by reading the building of the Chartres Cathedral. So interesting too, that this building is actually, I've spent a lot of time with this building and taking it apart literally angle by angle. And it's hard for me to communicate. For example, that you could take that facade where that rose window is, and if you just laid it straight down into the nave, the rose window lands exactly perfectly on the top of this labyrinth. So there's also tremendous symbolism between the labyrinth and the rose window that we won't get into, but it's important to say our buildings can teach. We can take our teaching into our buildings, and we can reverse it and take our buildings back into our teachings. So there's a lot that we can learn in our neighborhoods about mathematics. So if you put all of these things together, the core subjects of math, science, language arts, social studies, arts, all these things are things that we can learn from textbooks, or we can Google them, but we can also just walk out the door and walk down the street, and there they are for all of our amazement. And let me tell you what, until I started doing this little presentation, I didn't know all these things existed in such close proximity to my neighborhood. So what I encourage you, I'll bet you that almost every neighborhood has a story to tell, has multiple stories to tell, and has a lot of content to teach. So why does all this matter? Well, we're going to find out. We're going to take some of the information you've given to us. we're going to have a meeting tomorrow amongst ourselves. And then we're going to talk, and we're going to come back with some conclusions about how we could all work together maybe a little bit more beyond this. I got a nice little chat from Julie Williams saying like, okay, now where we go from here. We actually talked about doing some kind of a publication, or maybe for all the people who might be interested in this way of learning, or the actually, I know we're all architects, so a lot of us are, if maybe we're not technically architects, but we wouldn't be involved in this if we weren't shaping space, right, for education. So it's an interesting challenge. What does architecture look like when we're not talking about a building? And so one of the ultimate challenges for us as architects, what could we do if we didn't build a building? Or what we could do in addition to building a building to make sure that all of these other things, the building can become the departure point. So thanks to everyone. And we're gonna, we're asking you now for your challenges that you think the challenges are, so that we can take all this under advisement, and then we can come back in our session on Friday, and we can all have a conversation together about it.
Thank you, Stephen. I have obviously technology issues today for some reason. And I'm now connected on my cell hotspot, but thank you. Just what are some of the challenges? We have a couple of more questions and then we'd like to close it out. And again, invite you to come back for our follow-up session on Friday.
I want to give a shout out to Brenda Lowry also. I noticed that she's on this, and because one thing we haven't talked about is that a lot of the things that Linda talked about, and also Victoria, all of us really, that have to do with the natural environment. I mean, one of the most beautiful educational models that I've ever seen is the Aina model that is in Hawaii. The native Hawaiians have been learning through the natural environment for thousands of years. So like, this is not something that's brand new. In fact, you know, we can turn the clock back and we can learn from these indigenous communities so much that's so important about our own survival that I invite you to come back on Friday, because I think we can have a really fun conversation about all this stuff.
So this question is a little bit different as we advance to the questions. This one is more about the opportunities. So what hopefully you guys have firsthand experience with opportunities from learning wherever, but also maybe there's a few things that we showed you today as well. Yeah, making it real. This is terrific. And I believe we have one more question, and then our I think we're doing fine for 3 more minutes or so. Okay. Appreciation. So any, and sorry, sometimes the answers go to the next one. So we'll sort that out before Friday, don't worry. But what are some of the questions that you'd like to explore further? One of the things that we thought as we were prepping for this conversation is that the conversation is ongoing. We're never going to be able to claim that we're there. It's something that is a continuous conversation, like a loop. And so these are, you know, once we solve the questions we have today, there are going to be more questions tomorrow. And so what are some of the things that the questions that you have that you'd like to have us toss around in our panel discussion on Friday, or that we can continue this conversation? Yes, it's perpetual. Never claim victory. We will always have to. Professional development, certainly. Teacher resources, absolutely. Terrific questions. Yep. So keep them coming. I have a quick little story in closing that I'd like to share with you. Is as I've been immune compromised through this whole pandemic and have retreated out of the city, I have been fortunate to be able to hang out with my kid, you know, which is kind of a cool thing, as well as my best friend's out here as well with her daughter. And early in the summer, they've decided to give, the experience of raising chickens, because, it's something we can do out here in the country that we certainly can't do in Michigan. So they've been raising chickens, and finally, a couple of weeks ago, we're able to the chicken started laying eggs, and so Elsa was so excited to bring one of these eggs into show and tell, because she's still going to school in Chicago, as is my kid. So they're doing the online thing, and she brings the egg to show and tell with her class. And the teacher said, "Oh, well, cool, Elsa. So tell me, which came first, the chicken or the egg?" And Elsa said, "Well, Mr. Smith, a circle has no beginning and no end." I want to just tell you that Elsa just turned 9, and she's in 3rd grade. And I think that this experience of having been in rural America for the last 6 or 8 months has really changed her way of thinking. And I see that as an inspiration for all of us. Kudos to Elsa for answering that question. But I think it also illustrates that our has no beginning and no end. So please join us on Friday for the continuing. Thank you. This is our jazz band.
Fun, huh?
There you go.
Hey,
Yay, it's done.
thanks, Baha. Thanks, everybody.
Yes, thank you so much, Baha.
So,
Yeah, everybody, great.
Okay,
Oh.
we're somehow still getting comments in the chat. Who knew?
Oh, yeah, good.
it's great. Well, let's keep track of them, and we'll circle back on Friday, right?
Thank
No,
you.
actually, we're going to get together tomorrow. So,
Yeah, it's okay for you guys in the web world to keep dancing. That's fine.
We passed the test.
All right, take care.
I love you guys.
Okay.
Love you guys. Thanks.
Too.
This was super fun.
Yeah,
Hey,
it was.
Amy, I have a present for you. She's gone. I'll tell her later.
Is it an egg?
It's a women's fix-it book.
Oh,
Nice.
great.
Yeah, it's old, but it's great.